everyone to another episode of ASAP Conversations. So today we have with us the Pakistan Advocacy Network from Pakistan, and we have a mix of old and new members today. And in fact, just before the recording, we were catching up, and it's really great to see you all here and like have this conversation with you all. And I'll just briefly say today we have Joshua, Tanzila, and Naba with us, and I'll just pass on to you and Nandini to just briefly introduce yourself. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum everyone. I am Tanzila from Pakistan and member of Pakistan Advocacy Network. I've been a part of ASAP since 2013, and my basic job and my passion is to connect safe abortion with disability and just push this agenda anywhere that I can, have cross-cutting discussions, and I am very close to private sector. I have my own business by the name Girly Things. It's a mobile application, and we deliver sanitary napkins and other reproductive health-related products to women across Pakistan and maybe inshallah one day across the globe. And our job is to make sure that women not just have access to authentic information but also to products. And soon we're also diving into services to make sure that the doctor is connected with the user, or the user can go and get connected with the doctor. So we have great plans, and I think I love connecting the development sector with the private sector because we all go hand in hand. I think it's a great cause. I love being a part of it, and I love my ASAP family. Thank you. Naba, I nominate you.
Oh. Okay, hi everyone. It's me Naba here from Pakistan. I am a public health professional and I have been working in the field of sexual and reproductive health for like last 7-8 years. Actively, I am a member of Pakistan Advocacy Network and have been working for for advocating for safe abortion services in Pakistan. Yeah, that's it. Josh, you are next.
Hi everyone, this is Joshua Dilawar and I'm from Pakistan and I'm a member of PAN, Pakistan Advocacy Network, and I'm being engaged with ASAP for the last 3 years. And personally, I'm quite keen to promote artistic mediums, promote social awareness and social messages and advocacy, because I think like art is a very strong medium and very important for to leave long-lasting impact on the young people and our community. So along with that, I have experience of sexual and reproductive health and rights for the last 5 years, and I'm actively working with different national and international organizations on SRHR, family planning, and access to safe abortion services. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'll just introduce myself.
Yeah.
I'm Nandini, and Aisha and I are colleagues, and we work together for Asia Safe Abortion Partnership. And I think it's amazing to see all of you, except for Naba. I haven't, and Naba and Tanzila I've met in person, and I'm meeting Joshua once more on this platform, and I'm really excited because I think India and Pakistan share such a rich history together that it's very interesting to have this conversation with friends across the border. Thank you.
Great. So thank you so much for the introductions, and I think we can just dive right into the conversation and really talk about what's been going on. So
Right.
Nandini, you can.
Yes.
You can
So my first question is actually for Naba, because I think as a public health professional, you are playing a very important role at a time when the world is going through one of its, a historic moment of public health crisis in the form of the pandemic. So my question to you is that, what was the situation of the healthcare system in Pakistan, especially in relation to SRHR services and abortion services? And how has the current pandemic situation affected the available services? And if you could tell us a little bit about that situation.
Perfect, Nandini. I would like to start with the fact that sexual and reproductive health and rights in the services, and particularly abortion-related services, has always been a taboo in Pakistan. And although the laws are in place, there are service centers, but still people face a bit of reluctance when they have to go for the services. Now, when it comes to its relationship with this pandemic, I believe that I guess all of us are observing this quarantine since March. It's been 3-4 months, and people are at home, working from home, having great relationships with their partners, and that has definitely, created a positive impact on their sexual life as well. This is in relation to the with the WHO's report, which has indicated that after this lockdown ends, there would be an increase in pregnancies and increase in childbirths, which will be observed. Particularly, the report was about Pakistan. I was talking to a friend of mine, which just told me she works in a gynae department, and she told me that they observed that there was this 30-year-old girl who had corona, which she was COVID positive. She came to for her delivery, but doctors were avoiding to for a premature delivery or to do her C-sec because they just wanted to not touch the patient and to avoid this entire situation, because there are a lot of taboos still, because they just want to avoid it as much as they can, and they requested her to wait for her full term delivery. So a lot of things has been observed within the healthcare industry itself. Doctors avoid getting in contact with patients just because they have to double sterilize their instruments. They have to use those PPE and all those measures. So they just want to decrease their contacts with patients and with outpatient departments as much as they can. Obviously, it's important for them and for their safety as well. However, I guess this has created an impact in all of the industries related to healthcare, and one of the major ones are the sexual and reproductive health rights services.
Thank you, Naba. I think that is a very good overview of the crisis. I mean, the good things and also the crises that people are facing in Pakistan. One of my follow-up questions, I mean, it's to you and it is also to anybody who wants to answer, is, therefore, like, say, if women cannot access, abortion services in hospitals, how easy or difficult is it to, say, access medical abortion pills across Pakistan? And is there enough awareness of what to, what pills to take and where to get them, how to do it, how to do it at home? Do you see the gynecologists stepping up to meet this situation through telemedicine or online consultations? What is the situation of that, if you can tell us a bit?
Yes, I have observed that teleclinics are addressing these issues as well. I recently came across a post as well on a female-based group on Facebook where a couple of women were talking about that, how they want to access abortion and how difficult it is. A few of the women obviously bashed them as well, that why you are talking about abortion, etc. But people do talk about it. They do have awareness. Otherwise, if they don't have awareness themselves, they do know from where to get information, or they can access the tablets themselves as well. I guess the increase in unsafe abortions is going to take rise as well. People do try methods at home. I have observed this in the previous my career as well, that a lot of people do come up with at emergency departments that they try to abort the child at their home by using the broomsticks, by using anything that is sharp and needle like or something like that. And when they cannot control the situation, they eventually come up to the emergency of the hospitals. But I guess, yes, the information is there, but that is obviously limited to the getting oral medications only.
Joshua, would you like to speak a little bit about the policy, the government's policy around medical abortion pills that Noreen was mentioning yesterday?
A lot of big organizations and civil society organizations backing the government, and they're collectively making some policies to make the contraceptives accessible and available for everyone, especially for the young people and the new couple. And the major issue is, like, obviously, as my colleague co-fellow panel Naba mentioned, that now like contraceptives are being sharp, and we cannot access to the contraceptives. So it's very true. And those who have the contraceptives, they are selling the contraceptives at high rates. So this is another issue, that contraceptives are being very costly, and Punjab government is not actually focusing on the availability and accessibility to the contraceptives. So it's very a major issue, and it's varies from province to province. So Sindh government has developed some policies on these, but I don't think that other provinces are actively working on it.
So yeah, moving on to our next panelist and Joshua. So I have known you since we met at Sri Lanka at the YI, and it has been a great journey of knowing how passionately involved you are in the issue of safe abortion and for SRHR. Creativity is something that you feel best gets out the message that we want to give. And so how has your experience been with that? And I believe Pakistan Advocacy Network has done previously as well a lot of theater workshops in with the name of making this issue more a little bit not so tabooed and like really normalized, talking about sexual and reproductive health, especially given that we from you have a very conservative setup that you work in, and even in India it's an issue that not many people are open to talk about. So yeah, just to share a bit about your experience.
Yeah, so thank you so much for a very great question, obviously. So I started my journey in 2012, and I attended my first workshop for theater to promote social awareness, human rights, and interfaith harmony. So it was quite effective, and we started working on human rights and interfaith harmony because uh, we all are well aware of the issues that are being faced by the religious minorities in Pakistan. So that workshop touched me a lot. So I choose to stay in the development sector, and I started working on the interfaith harmony and human rights. So I joined some youth-led organizations and some art-based organizations to use theater, filmmaking, music, and dancing, like how we can use these artistic medium to promote social awareness, and how we can use these artistic medium to break the stereotypes. Because I think that although the facilities are available in Pakistan and in other South Asian countries, but uh, things like SRHR, family planning, and access to safe abortion is so stigmatized. And before 5 years, I started particularly working on SRHR and HIV/AIDS prevention and family planning because a very close friend of mine, she died just because of access to not having access to safe delivery system. So she died, and that sparked me a lot. And that I was before that I was working on HIV/AIDS prevention, but when she died, that sparked me a lot to work particularly on SRHR. And then I uh, came to know that access to safe abortion is also a very, very big issue in Pakistan because no one talks about it. Even in Pakistan, if you are talking about SRHR, so a lot of organizations and government says just remove the first S and last R. Just you can just talk about the RH, reproductive health. Do not talk about the sexual and rights. So I would say that again that it's very stigmatized because I've seen some examples of different organizations who have developed and established a very good clinics in some remote areas, but no one shows up. Then there was a clinic. Okay, let me share an example. Family Planning Association developed and established a very good clinic in a remote area, and they said that there was very air conditioned, very well developed, and very well designed to make it youth friendly clinic. But no one was showing up. Then they came to know that the gate and entrance of the clinic was on the front road and the main road. So people were avoiding to be in the clinic because it was stigmatized. If a young people and a young boy came into the clinic, people will judge them. So they just tried to make another gate behind the clinic and back gate. So they were getting clients, and they were started getting young people to get the services and to get the ideas and information. So this is the thing that we have to break the stereotypes and taboo we have in our society attached with the SRHR and family planning and access to safe abortion information. Services is the next thing, but even we cannot talk about and we cannot get the proper information in our society if we just talk about such issues. So after that, obviously I'm a boy, and when I work on these issues, like people used to say that, have you changed your gender? Like you shouldn't be working on the women issue because women are already so empowered. So you don't have to work on those issues. Just work on your issue. You are a boy, just work on, like men are facing a lot of challenges as well. So I used to say the same thing, that obviously it's my issue and it's my choice. If I feel that I should work on women empowerment, so it's none of your business, first of all. And second thing, that I feel that it's my responsibility and I'm the chosen one to work on this issue. These responsibilities are on my shoulder. Started working on theater and how we can use theater to promote SRHR information and family planning information and services and to inform young people that SRHR and family planning information is quite important in their life, even if they're not married. Because this is another issue that family planning and SRHR information is only for the married ones, not for the unmarried people. It's another issue. So keeping that issue in mind, we also think that young people should be empowered and should be well informed about the SRHR information and family planning information. And as Naba said that UNICEF mentioned and shared that Pakistan will be delivering 5 million babies till December 2020. So we are gonna face a lot of issues because we have less and we have not good health facilities in Pakistan. And along with that, a lot of people will be facing unsafe abortion practices and MMR rate will be increased and that will be a disaster. So we should be well informed and well prepared for that because we will be delivering a huge number of babies. And along with that, I personally like the campaign that was started by UN Women, He for She, because I stood for my sisters, I stand for my sisters and colleagues, women colleagues who cannot raise their voices, who cannot stand for their rights. So we should be those ones and we should be the voice of voiceless people. So I think that I don't treat it as gender, but as a personal thing. I don't like it's my gender is my personal thing, but I don't keep it. And if I want to help a girl, so I'm a boy, I shouldn't help that. So I don't think so. Things should be like that. So I always come up with an innovative and artistic mediums and artistic ways like how we should break the stereotypes, because I think until we don't break the stereotypes and stigmas, we cannot achieve women empowerment and we cannot achieve the SRHR services and information. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Joshua, for sharing that. And also, like, I completely understand the challenges that you must have faced being, how you fighting for women's rights. And we all have heard the women are empowered enough already and no, you don't need to fight for them anymore. They already have enough rights. So yeah, more solidarity to you, more power to you to continue doing the amazing work that you're doing.
I mean, very interesting conversations. And my next question is for Tanzila. And, I know you've been a very strong young feminist voice and you've taken up very many interesting issues and addressed them. And my question for you today is that, the situation of women living with disabilities in Pakistan, especially in relation to SRHR and, access to SRHR, their sexual reproductive health and rights and abortion services. And how do you see what, in your experience, has the pandemic affected it? So if you can tell us a bit about that.
Thank you so much, Nandini. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So, if I think about it, if I look back and see the journey that we've had so far, this entire fight has been about access to information, access to buildings, access to panels, and the biggest access to public spaces. And that access gave a lot of empowerment to women with disabilities, especially. It gave a way to a lot of other opportunities, made the employment, made the socialization, or even going to the local store to buy some broccoli or something. It does give you a sense of lifestyle and you feel connected with the society. And I know many women with disabilities who felt more safe when they were outside their homes. And at home, we all become part of that fiasco of the brown family system, where sometimes women with disabilities face more stigma at home, unfortunately. A lot of work needs to be done over there, but I realized that we had a safe haven outside our homes. And especially for women who had severe disabilities and sometimes they felt like burden at home. So I think that suddenly the doors have been shut on our face. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. We don't know what type of hope should we have. For us who had employment opportunities, yes, they have been shifted online, but the whole escape was physical access. And I think that was the empowerment pathway for us, and it was not the opportunity itself. So I think it is a huge barrier, it is a huge roadblock that our advocates and ourselves will face. But having said that, it also gives ways to a lot of other opportunities, because a lot of people who are capable of finding those physical opportunities can also find opportunities online. And I am quite hopeful about it that they will. But I'm not really excited about this entire lifestyle online, because the online world was available to us even before COVID-19. And did it empower us completely? No. I think we need a lifestyle that is more engaging, and that gives us a sense of society and not looking at the screen 24/7. Now, having said that, in terms of COVID, um, we are very well connected with the idea of stigma. And there's another type of stigma that is on the rise, that is of corona shaming. Even if there is a patient of corona in a certain society within a big city, that person is shamed to the extent that this person would not reveal his or her symptoms, and that would put his or her family and her or himself into more jeopardy, more danger. So I think that when we as advocates, we were fiercely advocating for abortion rights or for human rights, I think we should also apply our tools towards corona shaming, because that is leading to bigger problems also. And if a person who, God forbid, has symptoms, if she walks to a clinic to get any other service, she might put a lot of other people at risk, but out of fear, she might not speak up, because here she's facing multiple stigmas at the same time. So I think it's like a double, triple-edged journey that we're having. And these are confusing times. These are times when there's a lot of uncertainty. Probably we are contemplating our own life choices over here, our personal choices over here. And I know a lot of friends who are getting married because they have no idea if the lockdown will ever be lifted. I'm not one of them, because I am quite hopeful. But what I'm trying to say is that these times have really affected our choices of life and what type of causes we want to aim for.
Right.
Moreover, speaking of girly things has taught me a lot. And one major rule or one major philosophy that it has taught me is that the closest industry to every woman is the beauty industry. And I feel that I think we as feminists, we should have taken advantage of that. We should have aimed for bridges that lead us towards more beauty-related platforms and taken these issues over there. That's when we get better attention. That's when we can connect the feminist ideas. Beauty is a very deeply embedded feminist idea. And it empowers you, it gives you a sense of being. It does not have a fixed definition. It has an array of definitions. So I think now, because of e-commerce, the boom in e-commerce, like my colleague Joshua mentioned, that products are scarce. If they are available, they have the prices have risen. But one industry that still continues to grow is the beauty industry. We still have women going to houses, performing waxing therapies or giving a massage, anything like that, of course following the SOPs. And I thought, if we had aimed for it, if we had trained these women on information about safe abortion, about contraception, and they still have access to these homes. So I think we would have been better equipped with making sure that our women, our society, they still have access to these services and they don't lag behind. So I think this is a major lesson that I learned. And it's not just about mental health. It's, what I like about working with ASAP, it's not just about safe abortion, it's about choices. And choices are very central to the empowerment of anybody. And like my colleagues were just saying something very interesting, I think, yes, women are very empowered. We are just constantly interrupted by patriarchy, and that is frustrating. Otherwise, empowerment is spot on.
Absolutely. I think you've mentioned some very interesting points, and there's now a very surreal, quiet silence about it. Like we are not really hearing, we're just hearing reports around, say, unprecedented levels of unwanted pregnancy. So the boom of birth of children, probably, and many of them will be unwanted. Domestic violence, that's another global issue that has been raised, that due to the pandemic there will be a lot of domestic violence. But when it comes to specifically for women living with disabilities, where do you see that situation going? Because there's really not even a concrete study being done or report coming out about the situation that they are going to deal with, and what is it that we can do to support, like in our networks. And like one other thing that I think it also connects to what Joshua was saying yesterday about mental health. Like this is a time when it will be a severe, severe issue in the coming, and it's already a severe issue now. In the coming days, it will become even worse. So how do we deal with this? And I think there's a lot to learn from women living with disabilities, because you've already been in those situations that today all of us are in. So you can talk a little bit to that.
Like as I think about it, already there is such limited data available. There was no research being done on disability, and within that, women with disability particularly. So much so that when the census happened, there was no questionnaire, no question to ask if you have a disability. The government was not interested to know what's the population ratio of people with disabilities. It was me, a couple of other celebrities, and some other activists that really put up a petition and said that at least count us. So I think this is me giving an example of where the sensitivity of the government stands. As for COVID, I think suppression and not having access to a certain lifestyle is also violence. So the lifestyle that women with disabilities have during COVID times should be counted within domestic violence. And the general basic level, on a micro level, I think women with disabilities, because of the gender part, a huge effect that comes from that is that every aspect of their life, every provision is given like a favor. And that has taken a severe mental toll on them already. And if I apply COVID-19 to the situation, it only gets worse. And with that, there's no representation in the media. There are daily talk shows, there are daily people who are talking about it. There are many other pressing issues. I understand COVID-19 is a big issue these days, but there were already many other pressing issues going on.
So I think one of the ways the policymakers have gone is prioritized issues and made a hierarchy of issues. Also prioritized certain lives and made them into a hierarchy, that which lives will get treated, access to treatment, which lives won't, will get left
according
out.
to their own understanding of each problem and how they get affected.
And therefore also health services and abortion services as essentials and non-essentials, and those are also getting into a hierarchical order, and some health services are also getting left out. So I think you've made a very important point, and I think that's my takeaway from what you just mentioned. So thank you so much, Tanzila, and a lesson for I think all of us to learn that all human rights and human rights issues are important, and they cannot take priority over one over another. We can't make a hierarchy of human rights issues. So thank you so much. Like how important healthcare and abortion services are, whether or not the pandemic is there. So I think that is something that we need to reiterate, that whether or not there is COVID-19 or there is a new pandemic, we have to have access to basic healthcare, basic human rights, and those are just non-negotiable. And that's where we need to hold our, policymakers and people in power accountable. So I think we come to the end of the panel today, and thank you so much for all of you for taking the time out and join. I know all of you are, busy, and also for your own well-being. So please do take care of yourselves, and this is something for our panelists and also for our audiences. I think these are times when we really need to pay attention to our own physical and mental well-being. So do that. And thank you so much. And for any further questions, please write to us at discussions.asap@gmail.com. We'll be happy to answer your questions.